What does it mean to go back on your word? The man had just decided to reject someone else's confession on one foot, and the next he regretted it. But this time it was his turn to be rejected. In the face of this situation, what can a man do to get his lover back? Without further ado, let's rush into today's main content. Neil is on his way to the freshman welcome party when he bumps into someone. He didn't realize that the other man was a freshman like himself. Because of the unpleasantness of their first meeting, Neil sees Otto as a thorn in his side. In his eyes, Otto is a big bad guy who is against him at every turn and steals his girlfriend.
너 되게 조그맣네?
After being teased by Otto about his size, Neil sees him pinning a doll he hasn't gotten in a while. To get back at him, Neil clips the doll. When Otto finds out, the relationship between the two drops straight to freezing point. So much for the first semester. Yet revenge just comes so quickly. At the beginning of the second semester, Neil did not take his classes within the allotted time. When he was reminded of this by his sister, the acting class staff was already full. The professor said only Otto, from the directing department, could give up his spot, so Neil went to beg him. But Otto, of course, disagrees. Afterwards, with the help of his seniors, Neil takes the class anyway. Meanwhile, Neil finds out that his sister is actually writing a novel, or a BL novel. The point is that the protagonists of her novel are herself and Otto. Seeing his name placed next to Otto's made him feel diabolical. He made his sister delete it, but his sister thought that he was worried about everyone finding out about his relationship with Otto, because she witnessed her brother kissing Otto. Neil tried desperately to explain that it was just a misunderstanding, but my sister didn't believe it. In the heat of the moment, Neil swore, if one kisses Otto, let the fiction written by one's sister come true. Unexpectedly, from that day on, Neil noticed a lot more boy couples around him, and to top it all off, when it came time to pick a partner in class, he and Otto actually drew the same group, which can only mean that fate isn't something you can't just avoid if you want to. Ron really is such a sweetheart. He was tricked into getting punished by Neil because he was late for freshman orientation. He even gets teased by Tim for being so cute. He's so good-natured, he didn't even lose his temper. Later in his college life, he had to work part-time because he had to work part-time. Basically all the events that he didn't attend. Tim occasionally runs into Ron. He'll hear about his part-time job. He would buy him drinks after his shift. He'll buy him a drink, only because on the day of freshman orientation, he ran into Ron, who had no money at the vending machine. Tim offered to pay for him. After seeing the drink it chose, he memorized his preferences. There's really no way I can resist a setting like this. And Ron is really cute. I'm sure the subcons are really sweet. Tim realized that he was able to see Ron everywhere at school. The girls tell him that Ron is an NPC for the school. Whether it's a library, a coffee shop or a cake store, he can be found wherever he can work part-time. Ron has two good friends. One is Neil and the other is Tina. Because he was always with Tina, he was assumed by many to like Tina, but rumor has it that Tina is dating Tim again. So Ron doesn't like Tim, but Ron just doesn't think Tim is good enough for Tina. He used to see that he was heckling with other girls, so he just really resented him. Tim didn't show up at Tina's birthday party. Ron sent a message questioning him. Tim, who had promised his classmates to go to the sorority, saw the news and came straight to Ron. He paid no attention to Tina, the birthday girl. He took Ron straight back to his dorm and took care of him with water. No, even if Tina sees it, she won't be angry. It should be noted that she probably knew from the beginning that Tim was targeting Ron. They lied to the public that the two were dating and some means to an end. I guess it's obvious from the fact that she said that she was being used by the senpai. Neil is constantly going to the professor to beg him to change his partner. This makes the professor think that he has some ulterior motive with Otto. The sister sees, again, Neil and Otto arguing at school, but in her eyes the two weren't fighting. They were flirting. She was thus inspired to go ahead and write it down. Otto, by chance, comes across a novel written by his sister. Neil is also convinced that he is now in the world of fiction, so he advised him to drop out of class or change partners in a hurry. But Otto can't do what he wants. From the first moment he saw Neil, he thought differently of him. Such a different mind will not be easily changed. On the other hand, Ron uses all his time to work part-time because he has to pay off his college loans. Also, he has always been on the giving side of the fence with those around him, even if he will not be rewarded for his efforts. So when he wakes up and sees Tim and realizes that he's the one who sent him back, he wouldn't want to owe him any more favors. He refused his offer to go to school together. When Tina asked if she wanted to ask Tim to do her own shoot, he made excuses to decline as well. Tim is in Ron's room and sees the name tag where he intentionally misspelled his name. He wasn't sure why Ron kept it. Ron and Tina can't be seen together. He thought Ron really liked her and that's why he hated himself, because as far as he was concerned, Ron was pleasant to everyone but himself, probably with the intention of befriending him. Tim offered to be his photographer, but Ron didn't accept it outright either. Afterward, he took Ron to a party. Everyone plays the game of kings. The king appointed 3 and 7 to kiss, though the thing itself was tedious. But then you run into the main character, Ron, and everyone comes to get excited. He had wanted to be perfunctory, but people were relentless in making him start over. So Tim, who was number 7, took his face and kissed it. Ron didn't feel uncomfortable. It put Tim in a good mood. That's the way it went. After the party, Ron got drunk again. Classmates handed him over to Tim. A confused Ron takes the opportunity to kiss Tim on his own accord, under the pretext of directing the shoot. It's not offensive. It's not acceptable. Further, wouldn't that be like, then why don't you guys get together? On the other hand, Kim Young-go sees Neil talking to a girl and he goes to stop it. But some of what he does is just childish. He used it in that way of making a prank, just to get the other person's attention. But this draws even more disgust from Neil. In class, Otto is suddenly serious about the play. It makes even Neil think he's up to some kind of conspiracy. He even sleeps at night wondering if Otto is sick. He also asks his sister to make sure. He writes a bad ending for himself and Otto. So boys, take my advice. If you like someone, you have to be nice to them. Don't tease them. Otherwise, you'll really backfire. Let's take a look at another couple. I assumed at first that Tim was aware of what he wanted and who he was aiming for, but he doesn't seem to know that. He's actually a lot like Ron. 2 outsiders. They are all over the place. Ron is responsive to people, and Tim was being nice to everyone. He doesn't turn people down. It's pretty obvious that it's an act to get him to treat people, and he often offers to treat people. No one is going to turn down his kind offer, except Ron. He always says think about it and then there's no answer. So Tim was curious about him. Not only did he offer to be his photographer, but he also asked Ron to be a model for his own shooting assignments. He prepares antidotes for Ron when he's drunk. These are all things he does when he thinks he's radiating goodwill towards others. But he's a cold person at heart when he's nice to everyone on the surface. He's not sure what he wants or why others do what they do. He's just using them as a way to be nice to the people around him. However, all of his behavior towards Ron has gone beyond his socialization. Ron thinks so too. He kept Tim's misspelled name tag and the hangover cure he gave him. He was happy every time Tim bought him a drink. He thought Tim treated himself differently. So when Tim offers him another drink, he unconsciously confesses his love for him.
좋아해요.
But Tim is very confused by his confession. He thought it was his behavior that had caused him to misunderstand. That said, it's really hard not to get the wrong idea, isn't it?
내가 혹시 뭐 오해하겠어?
But Tim, you're definitely going to regret this later. And another person who will regret this is Otto. He sees Neil getting ready for an audition and goes along for the ride. Watching him perform, he couldn't relate to the classroom at all. He also heard from his classmates that for this audition, the organizers didn't even intend to cast anyone at the school. He's pissed off at their behavior. While going back to Neil to get in his face, he told him to learn more if he couldn't perform, because the other person is someone they don't care about, or even hate. So Neil doesn't take his words to heart. Otto knew he'd gone too far. He began to initiate favors. He wonders why Neil always fails acting class when he's obviously good at it. So, he went to find out the truth about his failures. It was only when he asked that he realized that he had been misunderstanding him. Otto is so anxious that he can't sleep because he misunderstood Neil. Neil is no slouch either. He rejected the friend request outright, but he couldn't resist a call from the other side in the middle of the night. He added it the next day. The teacher assigns them both to perform on the theme of breaking up. Even if he didn't want to, Otto had to obey. After class, he stayed behind Neil. Neil thought something was wrong with Otto, but he couldn't drive him away, so he had to let him be. The two of them went to the library together. On the way, they were hit by their sister again. She had no trouble collecting fictional material again. Otto kept staring at Neil. It said, "Look, that's hard to ignore." After being warned by Neil, he tightens up a bit, but after he fell asleep, Otto was staring at him and touching his hand again. And more licentiousness is yet to come. He takes the opportunity to learn acting from Neil and moves to acting as an excuse for Neil to kiss himself. Neil gave him a perfunctory kiss. Not satisfied, Otto cupped his face and kissed him hard. As a result, the first kiss between the two is interrupted. The two weak-minded men hid behind the curtains. As a result, they were still discovered. After this, Neil is even more convinced that he is in the world of fiction, because Otto actually confessed to him. This happens to explain his perversity quite well. Someone who uses the phone as much as Otto does is Tim. But Ron isn't like Neil. He simply ignored Tim's call. Many days later, he was finally caught by Tim in the library, but Ron still wasn't going to make up with him. Or maybe he wasn't going to make up with him. There was no way he was going to press to get back to his old self with him. But before that, he'd promised to be Tim's model, and he couldn't push it. During the shoot, the venue that Ron had favored suddenly called to say that the rent would go up. Despite living on a shoestring, Ron wasn't about to settle for less on the shoot. even if it would strain his finances even more. He planned to rent that venue.
제가 가난한 거지 제 영화가 가난한 건 아니거든요.
The acting class is getting together again. Ron heard that Tim would be there, so he declined on the pretext of having to work part-time. Tim couldn't wait for Ron to go out looking for him. At this point, Ron is drinking with Tina. She seemed to have something on her mind, and the words didn't come out. Ron thought she was grieving for Tim. He didn't want to see his friend upset, but Tina says that Tim is important to her now. And Ron, who sees her as his most important friend, would definitely give up Tim for Tina. Hey, that's an enviable friendship. Both sides are in love, but there is so much difference between people. Otto is ridiculously nice to Neil. Not only did he have to book a shoot for next semester and take him out to dinner, but he also invited him to a movie at his house. Even, he remembers what time Neil wants his coffee. Neil also saw notes he had written on the fly that he had posted around the house as if they were treasures. He thought it was incredible. If they weren't in the world of fiction, there's no way their relationship would have gotten better so quickly. So good that before he went to bed, Otto would send him messages and make video calls. This is simply outrageous for him. Neil is going to die of shock at his recent antics. Otto also brought drinks to visit the class. Even Ron was incredulous. Otto talked to the other students about Neil. They all felt that Neil was an unbeatable actor and were asking him to film. Out of selfishness, Otto badmouths Neil in front of everyone. Predictably, this was all overheard by Neil. It made him very angry. Otto can't help but confess to his face that he's good at acting to get an appointment to film next semester. As a result, behind his back, he was still badmouthing himself and pouring cold water on himself, just like before. Sure enough, Otto's antics are meant to piss him off. Looking at the man who was still acting in front of him, Neil snapped at him. Kim Young-go, who didn't realize what he said was heard, was overwhelmed by the yelling. Afterward, he sent a message trying to explain, but he didn't know where to start. The progress of another couple is also worrying. Because of Tina, Ron wants nothing more to do with Tim. Tim says that even though it's not clear what his feelings are for Ron, but he doesn't want Ron away from himself. Ron just felt that Tim was even more annoying that way. Tim saw Ron being asked for a phone call. By the end of the day, the owner of the location Ron had originally arranged to shoot at reneged on not letting them do it for no apparent reason, and that's when the loan was pushing him to pay it back. When he was about to be crushed, Tim lent him his home as a filming location. He gave Ron his shoulder so he has somewhere to lean. Tim, at this point, may not have realized his feelings for Ron, but he knew that he would be jealous of someone being close to good. He'll be jealous of Ron's relationship with Tina. He doesn't want Ron to leave him. And on the other hand, since Neil listened to Otto belittle himself behind his back, Yi-hwan not only avoids him, but also spits on him with Tina. I have to say, it's like spouting off to your best friend about your boyfriend. Otto goes to his sister to find out what's going on in order to figure out his sudden revulsion. Who knew she wouldn't say anything? Otto had no choice but to ask for their home address. He was going to go to the door himself and ask for an explanation, but Neil didn't come downstairs. Otto just waited all night. He didn't show up for class the next day because he caught a cold from the rain. Neil heard about it and went to visit anyway. He was going to watch him finish his food and he was going to leave. Who knows? Otto asked about the reason he suddenly hates himself. Neil didn't hold back any longer. Otto then realized that he had heard himself bad-mouthing him in front of others. Now the misunderstanding between the two was finally solved. But Neil thinks that Otto's idea is really naive. He didn't know what he was supposed to say. He just wanted to leave right now. Who knows? Otto yent him. He mouthed the words for him to duck if he hated it, but his hand pressed down on his head. But Neil wasn't trying to hide at first. Only in the end, he ran away. As long as Neil sees what he wants, the pair is kind of making progress. But Ron's side is really so heartbreaking. He gave up Tim for friendship. Even though he was sad, he endured it. Tina tells him to think more about himself and see what he wants, but he still keeps turning Tim down. He made a lot of excuses for himself. He said it was because the two were in different worlds themselves. Now Tim is just pitying himself when he says he wants to date. He said that because they were different people, Tim's behavior had led to his own misunderstanding. He added that he likes Tim, but not to the point of giving up his friendship for him. But his feelings for Tim were clearly growing. He'll look over at the other person when he mentions a favorite in the crowd. Even Neil could tell that he just loved Tim, except he's still running away. Tim had completely seen the line at this point, but it's amazing that he didn't know that a relationship starts with a confession, and he didn't realize that Ron was still running away. So, you're not thinking in terms of your own reasons at all. This is really rushing me. Ron feels sorry for Tina in his heart after turning down Tim. After agonizing over it, he finally came clean with her. Ron then realizes that she and Tim were pretending to date. She likes the student body president because she was rejected herself. That's why she asked Tim to pretend to go out with her in a fit of rage. She wanted to make the president regret it. The point is, Tina saw Tim kissing a sleeping Ron at that point. Though Tim and Ron, at that time, were not supposed to have much else going on, It was a beautiful misunderstanding. Ron not only learned that they were pretending to date, and, again, he was told that Tim had actually liked himself a long time ago. On the other hand, Tina caught Tim out after she realized that because of herself, Ron rejected Tim. It was only after dinner that she told Tim how she could get Ron to stay with him. That means he has to confess properly first. Yeah, he hasn't even confessed properly. That night, the two made up. They started dating without a hitch. This pair has a beginning and an end. The other pair is just about as close as Neil can get to figuring it out, but is back to avoiding Otto. Even during class, he was nowhere to be seen after class. Until the day of the exam, Otto didn't even want to play the breakup scene with him, let alone acting. He was not happy to see his sister's novel, written about the two of them being briefly separated. Sophie almost screwed up Jung-won's final again. Luckily he came to his senses when Neil said his assigned line. He smoothly played out the ensuing scene. It could be the length of time. After the exams, the two of them got together kind of abruptly. It's not really inexplicable, because as it was said before, the two of them could be together without a problem, as long as Neil thinks it through. After this exam, he probably finally figured it out too. Why one would want to kiss Otto and not resent it again. The two young couples start a sweet love routine. Even on the set, they don't miss the opportunity to interact sweetly. As the story goes on, the story of the two CPS comes to a close for the time being. Let's wish them all the best and stay happy forever. Well, that's it for today's video. Thank you for your support and viewing, and we'll see you in the next installment.